back and forth.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. Hi. For all of you who don't know me, my name is Kelly Palich, and I'm the Heritage Program Coordinator for Patapsco Heritage Greenway. I'm seeing a few familiar faces, so thanks again for joining us. Once again, thanks for coming to the last talk of our 2024 Patapsco Day celebration. Our theme this year, National Themes and Local Stories, highlights manifestations of national phenomenon at the local level. So emphasizing how local sites and histories are embedded within a broader national context. Our speakers and events will explore various aspects of national history taking place within and around the Patapsco Valley Heritage Area. So today we have Kelly Palich joining us. Kelly is an archaeologist for the Department of Recreation and Parks in Howard County, where she has spent the past 6 years managing sites and projects on parkland throughout the county. Kelly's interests and skills focus on historic preservation through public education, and she's spent the past 20 years implementing programming, teaching, and involving all age levels in the process of archaeology and interpretation. So today, Kelly's going to be speaking about the historic St. Mary's Cemetery, located within the Turf Valley neighborhood in Ellicott City. The cemetery is historically associated with St. Mary's Chapel at Charles Carroll's Doughoregan Manor, and St. Charles College, which are two early county Catholic institutions. The cemetery consists of individuals, both black and white, who lived, worked, and worshipped within the community in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So this talk will address attempts at preservation and collaboration over the past 30 years and how working on this site through a community-based archaeological approach is the best method to preserving and interpreting the significant site. So with that, please join me in welcoming Kelly Palich.
Thank you all for coming out this evening. My first question I have, was anybody involved in the St. Mary's Cemetery project with the Friends of St. Mary's Cemetery? This was back in the 90s. Okay.
No.
How many have heard or know of St. Mary's Cemetery? Awesome. So this will be new for some of you, and you know, a lot of you already know some information about this. But yeah, so Helen Keller once said, "Alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much." So my presentation tonight exemplifies a subfield of archaeology called community archaeology, which is a method in which essentially provides a way for our community and archaeologists to work together to pursue a research design that benefits all stakeholders as equal partners. So descendant communities and local communities in general are often displaced from important places that define their historical context. Collaboration thus transforms archaeology from an elitist branch of science to one that participates heavily in community-based research, benefiting all involved. So this evening I hope to share with you how collaboration and community involvement has worked with St. Mary's Cemetery starting back nearly 30 years ago. Yeah. So historic St. Mary's Cemetery is located on a 3-acre parcel. Let me see if this clicker will work. Yep. Right in the middle, this whole area is Turf Valley Overlook. The golf course will be up here. And church records document at least 157 burials, with 84 listed as colored. These numbers vary. I know in some of the news articles I saw from the 90s, they listed 167. But the list I actually have compiled up here, there's about 157. And this can only be corroborated through ground truthing and archaeology. St. Mary's received the dead from the families of laborers, servants, and former enslaved laborers from Doughoregan Manor and Pine Orchard. Pine Orchard is actually was an area that was further over here. If you know where Pine Orchard Liquors is now, in that area. And as well as employees from St. Charles College, which the ruins are right up here off Terra Maria. And I'll show you a plot in a little bit that shows the whole acreage of St. Charles College Farm. And the cemetery also has connections to other local parishes in Howard County, such as St. Louis and St. Paul's. And this cemetery has a contentious history, one of which was only saved due to the collaboration and partnerships between archaeologists, the local government, descendants, and the local community. So this is just a developer plot from 1990, and as of this presentation tonight, there are 3 sections of known burials within this 3-acre plot. And for those of you who are familiar with Turk Valley, you can access the cemetery on Pebble Beach Drive. And there's a path between, I think, 3000 Pebble Beach Drive. And you can actually walk back there. It's county property. And so the original entrance to the cemetery was Cemetery Lane, and it ran all the way across Route 40. The other end of Cemetery Lane is actually on 144, so you can see. So there's 3 sections that we've identified. There's Section A, which seems to contain, it's a segregated black burial area. There are headstones that we've connected to individuals. There's Section B, which was the white burial section. And this is where the greatest number of headstones exist. And then there's Section C, which is in the southeast corner here. And there are presently 3 known markers. There's Mary Johnson and her 2 children, infant children, and then there's an Elizabeth Dorsey, who were all African American. So, my presentation tonight is going to focus on these 3 themes. Why does cemetery preservation matter? What present law governs cemetery preservation in both Maryland and Howard County? And then how can collaboration at St. Mary's Cemetery serve as a model for best practices in cemetery preservation? So why does cemetery preservation matter? Cemeteries have always been regarded as places, as emotional spaces, spaces for people to connect to their ancestors through the tangible remains of the past. This is especially true for African Americans. A lot of times you don't have that tangible remain, but if you do have a grave of an ancestor, you do have a place to go and memorialize them. Cemeteries also provide an insight into the historical context of local communities, including spiritual beliefs, familial bonds, immigration patterns, racial relations, politics, disease, and disaster. The loss of historic cemeteries over the past 75 years, at least, due to urban development, natural disasters and climate change, and abandonment and neglect, has become a concern and at the forefront of historic preservation. The lack of understanding of these significant resources only further hinders historic preservation. Hopefully, Historic St. Mary's Cemetery project can result in a better understanding of how these sites should be researched, documented, and interpreted for people to gain a full understanding of the significance of these resources. So protection of these sites are the responsibility of each state, county, or local municipality based on where you are. And they vary from place to place. For the state of Maryland, the 1997 Maryland Cemetery Act was established after a number of controversies surrounding the destruction of historic cemeteries throughout Maryland, including Whip Cemetery, Garden Cemetery, and then Historic St. Mary's Cemetery. So this is just a summary of the laws. So this law protects against unlawful removal of human remains unless you have a permit, unless if you have to ascertain a certain cause of death, unless in case if there's an erroneous interment and you have to rebury, or for medical or scientific examination. These laws protect cemeteries from looting of both human remains and funerary objects, and also vandalism of stones. And they're also required easement for property with cemeteries. And then it also requires reasonable access to cemeteries. Howard County has a number of laws, and this can be found in the Code of Howard County. So 1303 requires recordation, And so the Office of Planning and Zoning and the Cemetery Preservation Advisory Board is responsible for keeping a database of all of the known cemetery sites and burial sites in Howard County. This is actually from the Howard County GIS. Anybody can access this. If you, the website's up here, and then if you go under Planning and Zoning, and the first section is selection is cemeteries, and you can click on each of these points to find out the landowner. A lot of them do not have landowners because it's very difficult to ascertain landowners for some of these properties, but I think most of them have landowners listed. So, and the next two laws, 1304, access. A development that is building on land where a cemetery is located must provide public access to a cemetery. And then preservation, a developer that is building on land where a cemetery is located must dedicate that land to use as a cemetery in perpetuity. So I think these probably both came out of from what happened at Whips and St. Mary's. And then discovery of cemeteries. So if any person discovers a cemetery, previously unknown tombstones or funerary objects, developers have to stop work immediately and contact the state's attorney's office, the Office of Oversight, Planning and Zoning, Public Works, and DILP. And how often does that happen?
We had one time last couple of years.
Oh, okay.
They found they were digging up pets.
Oh, okay.
Where was it?
Violations, so any developer who removes human remains from a cemetery prior to entering the development process cannot develop the area. And then any violation can be punished by enforcement of civil or criminal penalties. But have these laws helped? So from the Coalition to Protect Maryland Burial Sites website, they say regardless of these laws, grave markers are still destroyed or removed illegally. Vandals are rarely prosecuted, and they lack the flexibility to deal with the varying degrees of criminal acts. Abandoned cemeteries and graves can be removed without knowledge. No laws governing accidental discovery. Most jurisdictions, there are no inventories or requirements for. Howard County does require that. Landowners can deny access. It's up to the landowner, but it's highly recommended, but it's not enforced. Hard to identify property owners, as I said. So a lot of times, if a piece of property is broken up or sold off, they do not mention the cemeteries in the land records, so that they get lost in translation, and so that ownership gets lost. And then there's also no guidelines for scientific or historic studies of burial sites. So hopefully our work out at St. Mary's, my goal is to kind of create a model for best practices and how to document and use this site as a model. So before I talk about our collaboration work, I want to talk a little bit about the historical context of this site, for those of you who don't know. We're constantly finding new information, so the information I share with you tonight is what we have as of right now. It's always changing. The land consisting of the 3-acre parcel cemetery was once part of this landform here, this 120-acre farm, and it was originally owned by the Dorsey family. And the last Dorsey to own the property was Judge Reuben Meriwether Dorsey. He actually lived over here in Arcadia. So you can see him here. This is the 1860 Martinet map, and so we know his residence was here. Even though his name is here, a tenant lived there. A tenant was farming the land. And then you can also see where St. Charles College was, and then Doughoregan Manor, the mansion. I know one misconception about St. Mary's Cemetery was that it was part of Doughoregan Manor land. It was not. It was separate. So it was part of Dorsey's land. whether or not, I know Reuben Dorsey was the second largest slaveholder in Howard County, and whether he had used this area as a burial site, I don't know. Again, archaeology can tell us that. So in 1860, a cursory glance, it's very hard to identify which tenant was living on this property, but knowing other things, I noticed that there's a James L. Vernay right here, and he was a farm manager. So just this record alone does not tell me that he was the one farming this land. But this is the 1878 Hopkins Atlas map, and there are, well, let me flip back real quick. So here we have one structure. So it could have been James L. Vernay, tenant farmer. And then in 1878, there's two. There's two structures here. Again, here's Reuben. He had not passed away yet. Still tenant occupied, 120-acre farm, St. Charles College, Carroll Mansion. Here's Pine Orchard down here. Looking at the census records for 1870, there's James Vernay, Bernie, however you pronounce his name, and there's a John Vernay. They're both farmers, and they're both living next to each other. So I don't know if they were both living on this farm and farming it. I'm not sure, but it's a possibility. And he just their names kind of match up based on the census records, matching it up with the map. So possibly. So why do I really think the Vernays were tenants? Because by 1882, the Dorsey heirs sold the 120-acre farm to John L. Vernay. So he actually owned the property. That could justify why I think that they were farming the property, but again, we don't know. So by 1884, John Vernay and wife sell 3 acres of the farm to the Most Reverend James Gibbons, Archbishop of Baltimore. I don't know what the connection is between the Vernays and the Archdiocese. They were not, John's actually buried at St. John's Episcopal Cemetery, so I don't think he was Catholic, but I have a feeling that what happened was St. Charles College was buying up local land because they needed a new area to place their dead because they were running out of space in other church areas. So, and yeah, so John did not have it. He actually owned property in District 3 at this time, so he had moved. So this is the first reference, the first image I could find showing the actual location of the cemetery within the 120-acre farm. This is the 1923 plat. And this plat was made when the whole St. Charles College farm was sold in 1923. So you can see how the whole farm, it was all this land, and then they sold it off in all these different tracts. So here you see there's barns. I can't quite make out what that is. It's some kind of structure. They have orchards. And then up here is the cemetery. This line here would have been cemetery lane. It actually will come out all the way here. And John Vernay did sell the rest of his farm to St. Charles College. So all this was incorporated. So what was the cemetery used for? The cemetery was a shared burial ground associated with Carroll's Doughoregan Manor, Pine Orchard, and St. Charles Seminary, and then St. Mary's Chapel, which was the familial chapel on Doughoregan Manor. And it was the first Catholic, church in Howard County up until 1855 when St. Louis was built and other Catholic churches were built. So while the whole cemetery is significant, My focus thus far has been on locating and documenting the unmarked burials of the African American community. The white burials are all marked, well, for the most part. A lot of the stones are knocked over, and we will focus on that section eventually. But for right now, we're focusing on the African American section. Some of these African Americans interred include families such as the Joyces. This is an image of Caroline Joyce. She'll come up again. She was a servant and a former slave of the Carroll family. I think it's pretty cool that we have that picture of her. The Joyces, the Bransons, the Addisons, the Beavers, Dorsey, Johnson, just to name a few, they all are listed. This is the 1868 slave schedule for Charles Carroll. So a lot of these names can be found, and this is just one page of that, of his census slave schedule. And I just thought I would add these images of the obituaries for Caroline Addison and the obituary for Carolyn Joyce, which is pretty cool.
What year was it?
Which,
Year. I can't see a year.
for which one?
The article.
Hang on one second. Caroline Addison passed away in 1894, and Caroline Joyce passed away in, I want to say 1923. So, let me just double check that. 1923. And then this, I don't know when this was taken, and this was from 1868. I've printed out my list of all the people that I know are in this cemetery. After the talk, if you want to come up and look at it, see if you recognize any names, because we're looking for descendants to work with us. So, or if there's a name missing that you knew was buried there, please jot it down. So, I want to redirect my presentation back to collaboration and what it should look like. So community engagement is multi-layered. It's a shared stewardship, multivocal, two-way communication. It involves trust. It involves capacity building, equitable partnerships, knowledge sharing, transparency, and joint decision making. So in sum, it responds to the shortcomings of scientific research in the past that have disregarded communities that were affected by the research. So I have a slide here. There's two different types of research. There's research in opposition, where everybody is working towards an independent means. There's no collaboration. So this is history for who? Whose history? Research in synergy is where everybody is working together collaboratively, and it's history for all. So this is the ideal partnership. So this project is 30 years in the making. It did not just start with me and my partnerships, but it really goes back to the 1980s. And during the early stages of development of the Turk Valley neighborhood. In 1986, the property was sold by the Archdiocese of Baltimore to Ellicott City Land Holding Company, Don Brewer. He purchased the property. It went through a number of transactions, different developers, but he was the first one. This fight brought to write the questions to develop or preserve, who is responsible for this past, and is this what the people of Howard County want, this land to be developed on top of these burials? At the time, there were descendants of the families buried here. The German family were very active in the early movement of this cemetery. The purchaser was fully aware of the existence of a private cemetery within the 3-acre parcel. And the only guarantee for the safety of these burials included any relocation of any cemetery or graves for whatever reason shall be to New Cathedral Cemetery in Baltimore at the owner's expense. Now, somebody told me that there were 2 priests buried here that were reinterred to this cemetery, but I don't know. 2 priests that worked for St. Charles College. I don't know. They're not on my list anywhere. But if that is true, they're the only 2 that would have been reinterred to this cemetery. And second, the party of the second must obtain all permissions and permitting from the State Health Department and State's Attorney's Office prior to disinterment with the assist of a funeral director. So in 1986, these were the only provisions given. These were the only laws that the developer had to follow. And the 3-acre parcel, which you can see within these meets and bounds here, was sold for $10,000. The reason why they thought this whole area was used as a cemetery was because of its price. If it wasn't a cemetery, it would have been valued more than $60,000, but he only got away with paying $10,000. Highway robbery. So the following year, the developer receives a building permit, but it is soon revoked because they did not acknowledge the presence of a cemetery on the application, just that the land was undeveloped. The county placed a hold on the permit, and the homeowner, or one of the to-be homeowners for lot 2 right here, R.T. Liebling, he backed out of the deal. He's like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. So H. Allen Becker was the next developer to come in, and he purchased the parcel and applies to subdivide the property. Yeah, so he subdivided it into this lot 1 and lot 2. And this permit was approved because he actually did identify on the application that there was a cemetery. But he said that the existing cemetery was only within this 150 by 150 foot area. Because, I mean, the markers were there, he couldn't lie about that. However, he completely ignored any other potential burials within the rest of the 3-acre property. The county requirement was reliant on an honor code system, and the developer negated to consider additional burials if they were not clearly marked, which was his right then. It was not law. When the county went to ratify this, they noticed a few markers outside of the smaller area and required that all remains found outside the remarked smaller cemetery be reinterred at the cost of the developer by state law.
At the same location or someplace else?
That I don't know. Meanwhile, so the Becker was arguing that, oh, there's nothing in here. There's nothing in here, there's nothing in here because there aren't any stones. And again, there was no law, so he could get away with it. So meanwhile, local residents, including a number of descendants of those buried at the cemetery, became highly concerned for the safety of the cemetery. In 1990, they formed a nonprofit group, the Friends of the St. Mary's Cemetery, to conduct research and support the preservation of the gravestones for future generations, as well as make sure access to the burials remain available in perpetuity. So these are just a few of I have a whole binder full that David Sinner gave me. He was involved in the earlier work of all the articles from the Sun, the Howard County Times. If anybody is interested, I can scan them to you. But there was a lot of drama, I mean, there's a lot of drama in the county now, and it was the same, for the cemetery. So in 1991, all stakeholders, including the Friends group, were given the church records listing all those interred at St. Mary's Cemetery. And this is where they say 167 individuals were listed. But at the time, they were only able to find about 51 stones that were still in situ. Due to vandalism, I know that even since I've been out there since 2020, stones have been knocked over by, whatever riffraff is out there. With this list, the county halted all permits until all burials were identified. So they tasked the developer to find every single 167 individuals, whether marked or unmarked. Unfortunately, County Executive Charles Ecker overrides the stop order, and this task was not completed because it was not law. So there was a lot of contention. He got a lot of heat for that. I actually have a copy of his executive summary that he wrote justifying his decision, and it was basically a defense. Meanwhile, the Friends group, in their fight for preservation, was asking questions of the Archdiocese, including why they would even sell a Catholic cemetery to a developer. So according, I forget who told me, oh no, it was one of the archaeologists who came to the site, or he works with one of them. And he told me that the local community was so mad that when the Archbishop came to the site and when the developer came to the site, they would sit there and throw rotten vegetables. So I don't know how true that is, but they definitely were there protesting when the developers came to the site. So in response, the Archdiocese provided a response. So one, the church did not have the funds to maintain or supervise the cemetery. Two, the church needed funds for inner-city church and school projects. Three, the church offered to split the $3,000 cost of a scientific survey to search for remains. That never happened. Four, the church noted, however, that there was no right of access to the property, and that this could limit the effectiveness of the survey or prevent them altogether. So the developer was not providing access to the cemetery, which is another reason why the local community was protesting. The following year, the Friends group petitioned to have a geophysical survey completed of the 3-acre parcel. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that is, but basically it's a technique that can look underground without digging. The survey was hindered, however, as they were denied the access to the property. And also, before they could get the survey done, the county issued the permit to go ahead and develop. And regardless of the fact that no effort had been made to document anything. So on June 30th, 1992, the historic preservation firm R. Christopher Goodwin and Associates, they were based out in Frederick. They were hired to visit the site to complete a systematic soil augering test and probing survey in lots 1 and this lot 2 here. So basically the areas that were unmarked. And unfortunately, during the survey, they didn't find anything. So the developer had the okay to go ahead, and a month later, on July 20th and 22nd, as construction work began, they began to lay out sewage line on the eastern boundary of the site, and the remains of 2 individuals were uncovered. Both the state and county halted work, and the professional archaeologists had to come back out, and they were brought to sift through the backfill that was excavated and identify any other potential human remains or funerary objects. So Goodwin returned to monitor the utility trench that was being dug, and they actually found more human remains and funerary objects. Work was immediately halted, and they had to call out the director of Manor Historical Trust, Richard Hughes, and the state archaeologist, Tyler Bastian, because they had to come up with a plan, what they should do. And they told the archaeologists to keep monitoring and testing, and once they kept uncovering more and more remains, they stopped. So they did send the remains to the Smithsonian Institute with Dr. Doug Owsley. He's a renowned physical anthropologist. And so he was able to identify 5 individuals from the human remains. Individual 1 was 60 years or older. male African American. And they were able to look at the, if they had any diseases, like osteoporosis. Individual 2 was 40 to 45 years, male, indeterminate. Now, indeterminate means that the fragments of bone were so eroded they could not tell race. Individual 3, 60 years or older, male African American. Individual 4, 25 to 40 years old, female indeterminate. And then a 60-year-old or plus female indeterminate. Now, the indeterminate were most likely African American because they were located within the area that has historically been labeled as segregated. These remains of these 5 individuals were given back to the county where they were reinterred. All of the remains were placed into one coffin and they were reinterred during a ceremony on September 11th, 1992. And a service was conducted by the Archdiocese. And speakers included Reverend Freeman with the NAACP, Joe Smith of the Friends of St. Mary's Cemetery, and Councilman C. Vernon Gray, who Mr. Gray was very active in getting this site preserved as well. So after all this drama, work was ordered to come to a stop. Luckily, the county and the developer were able to negotiate a land swap where 2 lots elsewhere were traded for the 2 lots here in order to keep this cemetery as open space. And there was a maintenance agreement made between the Howard County, Rec and Parks and Howard County government and the Friends of St. Mary's Cemetery the Friends group would take care of the cemetery. Unfortunately, as we see with a lot of Friends groups, membership eventually fizzles out. And at the time I started working for the county in 2017, the cemetery was abandoned again, but not forgotten. I don't know if any of the original Friends members are either alive or around anymore, unfortunately. And there was no communication between the Friends group and the county, so it just kind of sat dormant. And the descendants who were once vocal, so they left or they passed away. The German family passed away, and no communication was made. Unfortunately, even after this land swap, the neighborhood, Turf Valley, did put a volleyball court in the middle of the 3 acres. It was a sand-based volleyball court, and the county was like, nope, get it out. So it's actually, the volleyball court is now across in David Force Park. I don't think that the volleyball court really had much disturbance in the cemetery, though. So I want to fast forward to 2020. This is right at the, in the middle of COVID. And I was working for the county for 3 years. I had no idea that this site even existed. I didn't know that we owned it, didn't know it was there. We were in the middle, of COVID, and the Howard County Genealogical Society hosted one of its monthly talks on another cemetery in the county. And one member, Ms. Tracy Hill, Sarah's mom right here, she had mentioned how her daughter Sarah and Sarah's friend Nadia were working on their Girl Scout Silver Award on researching St. Mary's Cemetery. But they didn't know at that time who actually owned the property. So, being the archaeologist that I am, I went on SDAT and I found out that we were the landowners. So, these 2 girls are wonderful. They're about to graduate high school this year. When I first met them, they were freshmen in high school. And so they are so passionate about this project that they're actually continuing to do their gold awards on this project. So Sarah is working on creating a website for them to kind of reach out to descendants. And she's also working on hand mapping all of the stones that are in existence. And I'm going to come back in later with my total station and we'll overlay those 2 maps. Miss Nadia's project is on creating cleanup days and organizing cleanup days. So she should be having another one sometime this spring. And so Yeah, so I went on SDAT and I was like, oh, Howard County Rec and Parks. So I quickly, reached out to Tracy and Sarah and Nadia and, learned that they wanted to do their go to work project. So late fall of 2020 and early winter of 2021, myself along with several of my colleagues with the Natural Historic Resources Division met with Ms. Hill and Sarah and Nadia at the site. And during one of those early visits, we were blessed with having the opportunity to meet Deacon Alan Green. He is one of the most wonderful people I have ever met in my life. He couldn't be here tonight. He's actually in Southeast Asia. But he is a wonderful human being. And he is actually a descendant of Caroline Addison. So here's her stone here, and he's posing with it. He's also a descendant of, I think, the Bransons and the Crosses as well.
Ambrose Cross.
Yeah.
Fanny Stanton.
Yes, he is Fanny Stanton. And so after meeting Deacon Green, I knew this project was much more significant than one or two gold award projects could justify. So with the recent attention given to and concern for the preservation of African American cemeteries in Maryland, and knowing St. Mary's ties to the local African American community, I immediately sensed the significance of this project. So this cemetery, abandoned again after 30 years of abandonment, was now again at the forefront of our research and preservation efforts. So together with all of the stakeholders, so at first it was just this small little group of us, I submitted a proposal to Rec and Parks and it was quickly accepted. But as with many things in life, life gets in the way. And we've been doing at this for 4 years now. So it got off to a slow start. It takes time to prioritize on what to focus on first. I knew going in that this would require a lot of resources, such as time and money. We required either the use or purchase of a ground-penetrating radar machine, which I must say, I was told that they were submitting the paperwork to get it, but we'll see. We'll see if that happens. And also, we needed to bring in cadaver dogs to search. That's another method of searching for human remains. We needed to hire a cemetery preservationist who specializes in preserving headstones, to train everyone to properly do this work. I've never done it before. And we need the time to clean the site in order to accurately flag, map, and document using a total station and GPS. So this became a huge undertaking. And I always said that this is one of my highest priority sites, but things come up with work and life. And the first step consisted the process of cleaning up the cemetery so that we could see what stones were actually remaining. In the 1990s, they were able to locate about 51 stones that were still standing. When we were out in March of 2021, I think they found between 30 and 35. So the rest were they were most likely buried beneath debris. We also had to decide which section of the 3 acres to tackle first. Knowing that the southeast portion was the most disturbed from prior construction, I figured it would be easier to work from what we know to what we don't know. We knew there were 3 markers in the southeast section, and we knew this was where the remains of 5 other individuals were disturbed and later reinterred. This area was also the easiest to clear from underbrush and dead trees. So in the summer of 2021, my wonderful colleagues with the Natural and Historic Resource Division went out, and you can see the guys with their chainsaws. We spent 2 days clearing, and you can see how overgrown it is. It's very easy to lose sight of markers, and even to notice, any depressions or anything. So we removed dead trees. We removed those just for safety, and all this underbrush that was invasive, they cleared out. So you'll see in a picture a couple slides later how cleared it is. None of these trees were here when this was an actual cemetery, so hopefully, we'll be able to clear the underbrush from the rest of the cemetery eventually. So it'll be just as clear. So again, life got in the way, and money was not available for a GPR survey, yet we continue to host cleanup days over the next 2 years. Our biggest cleanup date was this past November. We had about 21 people. So I think, was it about 21, Sandra? It was a lot of people. We got a lot done. Kyla was there too. And so Nadia organized another cleanup day in December. And as a thank you, wonderful Deacon Green here actually reached out to Miss Lorna Klum with Mission Barbecue. Mission Barbecue actually provided lunch for us that day. So you can see this is, how wide this collaboration and partnership goes. So over this winter, 2 exciting things happened. The first one, I was just looking around on Facebook, and there's actually a Facebook page for Doughoregan Manor. It's for people who grew up on the property or have historic information about the property. And I found a post, this wonderful lady right here, Miss Jackie Hopkins, she had posted asking about information about this lady here, and Caroline Joyce. She's actually the 2nd great-granddaughter of Caroline Joyce. So I reached out to her, and she contacted me right away, which was wonderful. She had no idea that her ancestors were buried in Ellicott City. This is her family, the Hopkins-Lucas family. Her brother here, Daniel, is like the family historian, so he came out and he was very excited. So there's a number of Joyces interred here, and the stone that, there's no stone that we could find for Caroline, but the stone here is Mary Alice Joyce, and Mary Alice was, I believe, the sister of Caroline. Mary Alice, their grandmother's name is Mary Alice. She was named after this Mary Alice. So this was one of the most moving experiences I've had, just bringing them out. They had no idea their ancestors were here, and just bringing them to this space and just seeing them get emotional. I mean, I get goosebumps now just thinking about it. So, finding descendants is one of my goals. Because, I mean, there's doors, they're probably still here and they just don't know. The second exciting thing that happened was we finally found money for a ground penetrating radar survey, albeit in a small area. And this was, we were able to hire a contractor, my friend, Dr. Kat Sterner with Towson University, and Michaela Hardy, who was her assistant. They came out in February, and the difference between these 2 pictures is a day. This is when we had the snow around Valentine's Day, and then the next day it was completely gone. So they had to actually lay out the grid of snow. They had their 4-year-old help. So I just want to give a big thank you to them. They came out, they got the survey done, and they got the report back very quickly, which is unusual. So what is ground penetrating radar? I've been using that term a lot. It's a geophysical survey technology. You can see it kind of looks like a lawnmower here. You push it, and it makes use of radio waves to take images of entities underground without digging. It consists of a pulse transmitter and a receiver, and it sends impulses below ground. And the receiver captures the underground response. So the result is detailed in maps. I will show you, I have our results that I will show you here in a minute. And so why GPR? Why ground penetrating radar? We want to, because we have these 3 separate areas, we wanted to try to delineate a boundary. Were there burials in between those sections, or was it just an empty space? Why were these other burials in this section, but everybody else up here? Because they were all the same time period. So that's one thing. that ground penetrating radar and then further research into these people can tell us. So this survey was conducted in the cleared area in the southeast corner, so in here. And it was a total of 5 grids that they did this in. So here's a close-up of the different. So they ran the GPR about every 25 centimeters. So they got a good look underground. So they found results, highly, what they believe were significant results in grid 1 and grid 5. So grid 1, substantial anomalies were first detected here. This was an area where 3 known marked burials, Mary Johnson and her children, and Elizabeth Dorsey were located in the area where the reinterment was. So anomaly 1 is in this corner here. This was a possible burial, clandestine burial. Anomalies 2 and 3, this is in the area where the bodies were reinterred. So you can see a lot of noise here, a lot of static, a lot of disturbance. This could be a number of burials plus the disturbance. So again, only excavation would help tell us, but that's another topic. Grid 5 results show anomalies 6 and 7 here in the lower corner. These were believed to be other clandestine burials. And you can see 7 here is in the right at the cutoff of the grid. So if we would continue further this way, we would get a better answer for that. But this was believed to be a burial. All this other static, I'm not really sure what that is. The report is very technical, and I need to get training in this to learn all the jargon and how to read these maps, but so this is an image of the radargram, and it's a color image into which, so basically this shows what the GPR bounces off of. Anomalies 6 and 7 in grid 5, you can see this is just like the natural stratification, and you can see how these are the vertical anomalies that look like they are probable burials. And so this was actually grid 2 and grid 4 and grid 5 had some static, but they weren't comfortable in definitively saying that they were burials. So another method that we could bring in magnetometry could help possibly ground truth that. But it's interesting that there's burials here, and then there's something going on up here. And this is closer to actually where the volleyball court was. So I don't know if that's what all that static, that could be what all that static is from, disturbance from the volleyball court. But this is really cool information. I mean, this is 30 years waiting for this. So what we know is that there was most likely some kind of separation between the 2 areas. Why? Again, further research. My guess for right now is the cemetery, the larger area, they were all Catholic. I do know that Mary Johnson, or Genevieve Johnson down here, she was married to Henry Johnson, who was a blacksmith, who actually, he was never enslaved, and he was actually of the West Friendship. And maybe they weren't Catholic, but they were associated with Doughoregan Manor somehow. So, and if you're not Catholic, you can't be buried in a Catholic burial ground.
So why would you think there would be anybody but Catholics in there? I would think no, personally.
I know, yeah. So it's going to take some more genealogical
Or do you
research.
think a different time period?
They're all the same time periods.
Oh, they are the same?
Yeah. Yeah, like Mary was buried in 1890, as were her children, because she died soon after childbirth. I don't know, I don't think Elizabeth Dorsey, I don't think we know a date of death, but it was roughly around the same time period. So, it's interesting, to figure out what's going on. So further research, further recommendations from Dr. Sterner, focus on conducting GPR surveys in Section A. Because there are a few stones there that are African American, and there are depressions that are most likely unmarked burials, so they have to be. And I think, in Catholic cemeteries of the time, they would be segregated. So on the right-hand side was your white burials, and the left-hand side were your black burials. She suggested a magnetometry survey. A magnetometer is just, it's used just like a GPR survey, but it looks for variations in the Earth's magnetic field. So it's just another data set to use to compare. And archaeologists tend to use them simultaneously, but they don't give as much detail as the GPR. And then third, I want to get cadaver dogs to come out because I want them to, these two areas were actually disturbed because they had started pouring the foundations for the homes. So I want to bring out cadaver dogs because they can still detect whether there were human remains in there, even if they were disturbed. So my future collaborative plans for St. Mary's Cemetery, continue cleanup days. I want to clear out the segregated area A for further GPR work. I want to write a grant to get Robert Moscow out to do a cemetery preservation workshop for us. Hopefully I'm shooting for spring of 2025. Working with cadaver dogs to focus on all 3 acres. And Deacon Allen Green wants to actually reinvigorate the Friends group. And which I think, I don't know if they still have their 501c3, but he's researching into that. So he's going to be retiring, so he's like, I'm going to have all the free time. I'm going to clean all the stones and restore. A lot of the stones are broken and knocked over, and I want to get them restored. We're going to design and lay out natural trails that run through the cemetery and make it more accessible for everybody. And I want to create and install interpretive signage to tell not just, who is buried there, but I want to tell the story about why they're buried there and the story of the local community. So, what have I learned from this project thus far? Collaboration matters. Cemetery preservation is not a one-person job, as you have seen. There are many stakeholders involved, as we have seen. The key players include the local government. I'm very lucky to have employers who support this project. State government, depending on what, happens, the laws. Developers, neighborhood communities, professional archaeologists, genealogists, historians, and of course the descendants. So why does collaboration in these type of projects matter? The neglect of cemeteries, specifically African American, has become a chronic issue within the field of historic preservation. Cemeteries hold different meanings to different people. For descendants, the loss of these sites leaves them without a place to memorialize their ancestors, often the only tangible remains of their past. For archaeologists, this work provides the ability to look at the social and cultural landscapes and change in its historical context and tie that to the present. Collaborative-based archaeology, therefore, is most often the best practice for both the descendant and archaeological communities to work together to pursue the most beneficial outcomes when researching and preserving historic cemeteries. As a collaboration, all parties are involved in every aspect of the project, from research, public engagement, documentation, and eventually preservation and interpretation. This project has the benefit to serve as a model for best practices in collaborations with descendants and care of African American cemeteries in Maryland and Howard County. The St. Mary's Cemetery Project is a project by the local community for the local community, giving the various stakeholders a personal stake in the process of preservation is the best way to ensure stewardship and long-term care of these sites for the future. Thank you very much. highlight a few upcoming events that we have. Saturday, April 20th, from 10 to 2, we have our annual Archaeology Fest, Public Archaeology Dig Day. We're actually going to be at South Branch Park. It's like just before you cross the bridge into Carroll County in Sykesville, along the river, looking for some old mill buildings and the cannery. On May 18th, I'm doing a talk on why saving old places matters, historic preservation in Howard County. Sort of what's happened in the past and where we're going. And then archaeology in the parks volunteer opportunities. I'm always taking volunteers, so if you're interested, I have a sign-up sheet. So, thank you all.
All right, we do have some time for questions if anyone has them.
Yes,
for
sir.
Kelly.
Okay, I just, the radar that went underground only went like maybe up to 2 feet down.
4 meters, yeah.
4 meters?
You can set the depth, but they went to a depth of 4 meters.
They were, okay, so that's like 0.4 to 0.6 meters. Okay. I was just wondering how deep the graves are normally dug back then, and how
That's a good question.
top to bottom were the coffins.
They found that it was about between 0.4 and 0.6 meters below surface.
Okay.
That seemed to be the general depth of the burials here. After that, the results kind of disappeared.
Mhm.
Good question. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the other cemetery?
Whoops.
That is not Whips. If you go down Frederick Road and to where the historic Negro schoolhouse is, up above it,
Oh, St. Paul's.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's in just as bad a condition.
Oh, yeah.
Also another Catholic neglected cemetery.
Yeah. Yeah, I've explored back there. 'Cause
I worked as a preservationist in the county for only a year and a half.
Yeah.
Back in 2000. And I never went up there. I only went up there one time all the days I spent in Ellicott City
Yeah.
doing different jobs.
Yeah.
And I was shocked to see how bad it was.
Yeah, they, I know a couple of Boy Scouts have done some Eagle Scout projects
Yes.
out there,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's, overgrown out there
It's a
as well.
quirky spot, number one.
There's also,
Oh, it's worth your life to
Yeah.
walk up there.
Yeah.
sort of, as you're driving on the driveway to the Ellicott City Colored School Restored, at the bottom of the hill where the larger parking area is, just back there, there's a cluster of like three stones, of another family. It's just like a random family burial.
Is that where that house was, kind of?
No.
No?
No, the house is actually up the hill behind the school.
Okay.
This is at the bottom of the hill.
Bottom of the hill,
That cemetery has a lot of Irish immigrants in it. Because
Yeah.
if you read the gravestones, it talks about which county in Ireland they came from. I'm going to presume, as a former historian, that many of them were workers on the B&O River.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yes,
So would there be a chance to research anything from Doughoregan since the church was there? And has anyone looked into the records they may have kept of burials out
I know
there?
Deacon Green is actually forming those relationships with the family, so
Good.
hopefully one day he can access,
Yeah.
and get those. Ed?
Where did the GPR come from?
So it was actually, it's the Towson University's forensic.
I was always told that HCC, either somebody there or HCC themselves had that.
She never, yeah, Dr. Cripps, she never responds.
Is she no longer with us?
She's like, I think she's like the dean of the department, so she doesn't really do any archaeology work anymore. But hopefully, we'll be getting more.
Did I see a ironwork behind Deacon Green in one of those photographs that you had?
There is, around one of the family clusters, there is an iron rock
But it's
fence.
just like a piece of it? No, there's no square or?
It's like 3 sides.
Okay, thank you.
As well as I was to ask, I can see that fence, when was that added?
I don't know. I could tell you if I don't know which family is buried in there, but if I knew, when I go out next time, I can look and I can kind of figure out based on those burials. Early 20th century. I think the latest burial is in the early 1930s, and the earliest was 1886, so sometime between those years.
So tell me about the terrain. Is it flat? Is all of it tree? Is it, have the trees been cut down?
It's all flat
Okay.
and it's all new growth.
Oh, you took all the trees out?
Oh, no. The trees, they're new growth,
But
so.
you can GPR with trees?
That's why we started in this one section, because there weren't as many trees.
I see.
We can maneuver the GPR as long as the ground is flat and the underbrush is gone. They did have they did have to work around a couple of the bigger trees.
Okay. So those 5 areas that, how, is that, like half an acre? would you
It's
say?
about half an acre, yeah.
Is there any chance that bodies could be under the trees where,
Yeah.
If you go out to, I can't remember where Oakdale was, the cemetery that's off Cherry Road, something, there are trees that are growing up next to the headstones, and there are gopher holes, groundhog holes everywhere. You have to really watch.
That's
the
one
angles.
problem we don't have
Groundhogs.
at St. Mary's is the gopher holes, the groundhog holes. We have fox dens that are
Yeah.
everywhere, but we have our resident fox family.
Oh.
But the gophers, the gophers don't seem to be an issue out here.
So Kelly, when the GPR is running over the roots of, we're gonna call them modern trees, do the roots change the pattern?
Not too bad, because they have like different depths that they
Okay.
can look at and do a time splice.
Okay, so they're gonna look underneath most of the peripheral
Yeah.
roots.
I believe with GPR, it also, like, there's some difference between organic,
Yeah.
like, wood materials and then like rock and metal that could be in a
Yeah.
casket, so.
And I know the software they use, it does real-time corrections in the field, which is really nice.
So what's the end game, is to preserve what's here and make it, have it more of a site for people to visit?
So Deacon Green, we told him about whips,
Uh-huh.
and he loved that setting. So, it is in the middle of a neighborhood, so we don't want a lot of heavy traffic
Right.
for the neighbors. But we do want people to be able to access it and go there and visit and learn about this site. So, putting in trails to make it accessible for everybody, putting in the signage for people to know what's here. Because, it's in the middle, and, if you're walking your dog and you just stumble upon these burials in the middle of a neighborhood.
So is there a marker now where the people were reinterred? Is there any kind of a little,
There's a wooden post,
just a post, no name, no, this is what happened, there's,
no signage.
okay, so you need
That's-
something for that.
Yeah.
I was thinking there should have been baptismal records at St. Mary's Church,
Yeah.
if they're Catholic, so then they should have some idea of who got buried there. If they never left Doughoregan or.
Yeah,
their
I
nearby
have
property.
the whole list from
Okay.
St. Louis.
Okay,
So these are all, there's like a couple lists, I've compiled them all. And, like Fred Dorsey sent me one that was missing on the church one, but all the ones that are on the list are.
is that somewhere to be
So
accessed?
can we get that from you?
I can send it to you.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Does Reckitt Parks have any kind of budget for maintaining St. Mary's Park?
No, that's why Deacon Green wants to reinvigorate the Friends group. That's a very good question. We have a little bit of budget to do the GPR, but yes, originally they didn't have the budget, so that's why they formed the maintenance agreement with the Friends group. And that's typically what happens with these types of sites. I can tell you now that our Natural and Historical Resources crew does go out and mow the path for me and all that now, but
Have you tried goats? It cost $1,002.
yeah,
Yeah, nobody's tried goats yet?
no,
Martha Clark has goats.
that's true, that's true. I don't know how the local neighbors,
If the fence them out, movable fences.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
although they would probably, there is, the local neighbors do dump
Scalp.
yard waste and stuff, so.
Oh.
But it's not too bad, they're pretty respectful. Yes.
Are you gonna complete the GPR before you choose the pathways for fear of putting a path over?
Yeah. So the one area I know is disturbed from the foundation. And that's one reason why we wanted to get the GPR done in the southern section. So our next would be kind of the path that we have now that we created. That will probably be our next focus, so we can put the path in. But I mean, the two other areas are pretty, well defined where we won't put a path, because there is a natural path that splits between the black section and the white section. So. Yeah. Yes.
This audience, if I can put in a plug for something else, this audience may be interested that there's a group of us who are doing a similar kind of thing with Ovella Cemetery.
Yes.
And we actually have a core of a friends group that's started, and we have Kyla offering professional guidance and PhD organizing, some cleanups and that sort of thing. So a lot of what you had to say about that collaboration really made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We found that to be providing a basis for success in the future, but we're dealing with the same kinds of issues in terms of identifying descendants and learning their stories and clearing enough so that you can do the GPR and all the dead wood. It's a project.
How many acres is the oil?
That's 3 acres.
Oh, it's 3 acres.
Yeah, and it was largely wooded, but very, very steep. Part of it
Yeah.
very, very steep.
Yeah.
And very rocky.
That may be a challenge for the GPR, but if it's like a slope. But
It's like a hill.
I did mention to Kyla that Dr. Sterner, I mentioned to Dr. Sterner too that you guys would be interested in possibly reaching out to them for some GPR work. So.
But if anybody in the audience wants to come to the cleanups and you do Facebook, you can look at the Friends of the Oella Cemetery, and the dates for the cleanups would be there.
Excellent.
Yeah, the 13th, April 13th.
April 13th.
April 13th.
No, I'm sorry, it's the 20th.
April 20th? Oh, that conflicts with.
Yeah.
Okay, you can come, you can come in the morning to the cleanup and then go to archaeology.
And I will say that St. Mary's, they're on Facebook, there's the girls have created a St. Mary's Cemetery Project Facebook page as well. So I don't know how frequently they are posting right now because they're getting ready to graduate, but that will continue on. Sarah is really wants to continue as because she's actually, I think she's going to Salisbury University in the fall, and but she wants to continue working with this. So, and they're wonderful kids. They go to Marriott's Ridge High School. Cool. So.
All right, well, with that, thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, we did have to cancel our open house at the Nike missile site this Saturday due to inclement weather. So apologies to all. We'll be communicating about when a potential rescheduled date is determined. So we'll be in touch. Thank you for joining us. Please grab snacks and water on your way out.
You'll be driving in.
No.